Continuing on with these Formula One cars, here's another one that just kind of sneaks into the group. Your 1983 Ram Mach 1. It's the Kenny Atchison's Jacques Villeneuve Sr. car, from 1983. That thing, when it just oozes history when you're standing around it. Give us a little bit of a story and background about that car.
Yeah, it's again another great story behind a Formula One car. So again, I was racing and constantly, again, watching one of my best friends saying, "Okay, well, you finished your race. I'm going to go in the next race with my other car," and I'm going, "Well, I can't drive in that race. I don't have one of those." And so I started searching for a proper DFV engined, competitive 80s, pre-86 Formula One. This is the considered to be one of the most exciting series for gentlemen drivers, is because it's proper Formula One. I'm talking about the years of Niki Lauda. When you watch that movie Rush, this car was raced in that period. Oh, yeah, and I mean, these are all the famous real drivers, Jackie Stewart, all these guys. They raced in these cars, and these are real race cars. These are not Sunday driving cars. You take this out on the track, and you're driving like Niki Lauda, and this car, I wanted something that would be FIA registered to race in this series, but would also be competitive. And so I searched around and I found the car in Australia. It's a March Ram. And for a lot of people who don't know, March is probably one of the top competitive race cars for many, many years in Formula One. And this March Ram was one of a couple of this series. And when this car was raced in period, it also didn't win as well as it should have because the engine they had in it was flawed. And they realized that it was set wrong. Again, another car that when it came out of period, it went into Masters Historics and it won the championship. It was phenomenal. But what's unique about it is who drove it and why. Kenny Atchison was a well-known driver back in period. He was one of the guys. There were 3 different drivers, but the most important driver was a guy named Jacques Villeneuve Sr. And a lot of people know the history. Gilles Villeneuve, Gilles was his brother. Gilles Villeneuve was Ferrari Formula One champion, really amazing driver, probably considered one of the best Ferrari drivers of all time. And he had a son named Jacques Villeneuve, who also became a world champion Formula One driver. And so he was named after Jacques Villeneuve Sr. So most people know him by name. But what Jacques Villeneuve Sr. became famous for was he was a snowmobile race car driver up in Canada. And he would win all these snowmobile races. And they wanted him to come drive a Formula One car at the Canadian Grand Prix. So he got sponsored, of course, by Canadian Tire and ended up in the Canadian Grand Prix. That was his first real F1 drive. And unfortunately, he didn't have enough sponsorship to stay in the series and went back to snowmobile racing. But this car became very coveted and, like I said, won really well. It also had a completely rebuilt engine. I've only put, I think, 5 events on the engine after it was rebuilt. So it's, again, very low time on the DFE engines. These engines are the engine of that period. Almost all of the Formula One cars in that period used this engine, unless it was a Ferrari, which would only use a Ferrari engine. But most of them use this engine. And the car has a ton of spares. I mean, I've got extra bodywork. As a matter of fact, I even acquired the molds for the bodywork. So if you go out, bang it up and race it, and you got to make a new panel, it actually comes with the molds, spare rims and tires, spare noses, spare wings, all the accessories. It's an amazing car. I've flown it all over the world. And for me, my first experience in this car, I had it delivered to me the day I took delivery was in Portugal at a track I'd never been on, in a car I'd never experienced. And I got in the car, qualified third, and won the race. As a matter of fact, it was so funny because it was such an amazing race, and my mechanics had no expectation I was going to win. And they were surprised when I qualified. And after about 3 laps, because when the green flag came out and I took off, I'm like, did I go early? Because nobody's behind me. And I'm driving. And I look at the boards and I'm like asking them, is the race over? Did I miss something? Because I've never seen another car yet. And they're just going, keep going, keep going, keep going. I'm like, okay, I'm just racing. It was so lovely to drive. And it wasn't until the last lap that I actually saw one guy in my rearview mirror, and I still won the race. And I got to go up on the podium. First time I stood on a podium in Formula One. And you get your flag, they hang your flag up. It took 20 minutes for them to find an American flag because they had no chance. They didn't think I had a chance of winning the race. I got the trophy sitting right up here. They couldn't find the flag. Finally, they got the flag. They played the American anthem, which again, I think they had to search for it. And so needless to say, I fell in love with the car. I won second in my class in the Canadian Grand Prix. Would have taken first, except my mechanic forgot to put clutch fluid in, and I had to power shift it for the last 2 laps, but still made second. But if you want to race in the Masters, and the Masters is a phenomenal series, if anybody out there wants to race in it, you're not going to have to spend $1 million to get an F1 car. This is a much more reasonable car, and it's inexpensive to run compared to like a Ferrari. And of all the other ones, it's got great provenance, great drivers. Even Nelson Piquet Jr., who raced Formula One for Renault, he took this car, he took it and did some racing with this car. It's got just such a great history, but it's also super competitive, and it's a beautiful car. If you just want to put one in your collection, it's got some great history. But if you want to drive it, this is the car you want. There's one more point of reference too. I took the car down to the U.S. Grand Prix in Austin and raced it there twice. Both times, it poured down rain. As a matter of fact, you talk about hurricanes. We literally practically had a hurricane during this was just during the regular Formula One race, the pre-race, coming down that giant front straightaway. It was like a waterfall, and we're driving in the rain. And so it was under a yellow flag, but still it was an amazing event. But the car has been to Austin twice.